Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Daryl Labar, and if you're here today to learn about advanced liquid templates from Colin, you're in the right place. This meeting will be recorded, so if you are unable to make it, or if you want to refer back to it, it will be posted on our events page. Feel free to watch for a tweet from XRM Virtual when that is actually posted. XM Virtual is always interested in having others assist us. We're a volunteer group. If you are interested in speaking, or even if you have a topic that you would like to hear more about, we would love to find a speaker for that. Or if you're just interested in helping out, we have other opportunities for that as well. Some of our future meetings we have coming up on the 16th, we have Jason Latimer talking about Azure functions, and the meetings on the 6th, 27th, and July 11th as well. So if there's anything else that you are interested in learning and you don't have anything out there currently to learn about, please let us know and we'll add it to the schedule. We also support CRMUG. They have a whole list of webinars coming up in the near future. Feel free to check those out as well if you're a member of the CRMUG. And then also conferences. We have the CRMUG Focus coming up May 8th through the 9th, Inspire, Ignite, and Envision. I will be attending the CRMUG Summit in Nashville this year, so if you're attending that, you can look out for me. I'll be doing some pre-conference training, so if that's something you're interested in, feel free to come and join here. If there's any other conferences that we don't have listed that we should, please let me know in the chat window, and we'll add it to future slides at the very least, and we can let others know as well. And that's pretty much as much housekeeping as we have to do for today. I'm going to turn over to Colin Verma here. He's a solution architect and full-stack developer, primarily in the Microsoft realm. He has a passion for building solutions and exceeding expectations. Currently, he's serving as the technical director for service delivery at Audaxio Business Solutions, helping delight customers with awesome solutions. With that being said, take it away, Colin.
All right, thanks, Daryl.
No problem.
All right, so let me just switch it over to our other presentation here.
And if you do have any questions, feel free to type those in the chat window, and I'll butt in whenever is appropriate to ask your question.
All right, so thank you again, and thank you everybody for joining today. So we're here to talk about liquid templates for Dynamics 365 portals. And we're going to look at both a little bit of basic stuff so everybody can kind of get onto the same page and understand what liquid templates are, but also look at some of the more advanced scenarios that you can use liquid templates for. Just to preempt that, I am Colin Verma. I work with Audaxio Business Solutions. You might not have heard of Audaxio Business Solutions, but you might know us by our former name, ADX Studio. So we used to be ADX Studio before Microsoft purchased the ADX Studio portal product from us. And I actually started ADX Studio almost exactly 5 years ago as a developer and have implemented probably hundreds of portals over the years, so I do have a fair amount of experience with the portal technology. Microsoft ended up buying the portal technology in October 2015, and then did their first release of the portal in May 2016 as CRM portals, so you might know it under that name as well. Then in the fall of 2016 they released another iteration of the portals called Dynamics 365 portals. So that's what it's known as going forward, is Dynamics 365 portals. So what we're looking to talk about in today's session is we're going to give you an overview of Liquid and look at some of the standard Liquid functionality, and then we'll take a quick little demo of that standard Liquid functionality. And then we'll get into the advanced stuff. So we'll look at stuff that's not as documented or might not have been seen in documentation, as well as how you can take those advanced concepts and apply them to your own portals in building rich interactive experiences with Liquid. So I'll give you a couple of demos of how you can actually take the concepts that we're going to look at today and apply them to your actual portal projects that you either have in process right now or are going to be building in the future. So we like to think of Liquid templates as your portal, your way. Liquid templates are really there to give you the option to build the portal in any fashion that you would like. So they're a dynamic templating language. So basically, you could build any door that you see on the screen here. They allow you to customize the look and feel of the portal as well as the data that's presented. So you can present that data that you have in your CRM in any way, and it can be any data. So again, it's your portals, your way, any way that you really want is what you can do with Liquid templates. So Liquid templates actually don't originate from ADX Studio or Microsoft. They actually originate from a company called Shopify, which is a Canadian company out of Ottawa. And they actually built the Liquid templating language a number of years ago for their own purposes, but decided to open source it. And as part of that open source implementation, a group of people took up and made a .NET implementation of Liquid templates. And this templating language basically allows you to have dynamic content within your portal through a series of tags, objects, and filters so that you can display content from various entities and have logic based upon all of that. So it provides a really great foundation for you to create dynamic content and be able to have logic on that content as well. So you can look at the documentation at the .NET liquidmarkup.org, as well as there's tons of documentation through blog posts that I've done, as well as other bloggers out there, as well as there's just the documentation straight from Microsoft as part of that. So the power of Liquid templates is really in the fact that you don't need to redeploy the code base every time. So this was a huge pain point when we were ADX Studio, is that we would have customers or clients want to make small little layout changes, like perhaps changing a column from one side of the page to another, or changing the look and feel of breadcrumbs. And back before Liquid templates, we were really limited to changing the code base. So we had to change the code base, change the HTML, and then redeploy that code. And because app services didn't exist in that time frame, the deployment actually took a number of minutes to do. It actually would take up to 15 or 20 minutes to do a deployment, and you would have to be a developer to know that. So with Liquid templates, the Liquid is actually stored within the CRM system. So you don't have to redeploy that code base to do that. And as the Dynamics 365 portals, you actually don't have access to that code base. So this is even more important to have that logic and that information stored as part of the CRM. Liquid is a language that can be used almost anywhere within the portal, so it can be applied to web pages, entity lists, CRM records, as well as content snippets, and basically anywhere you can write some HTML, you can write some Liquid. The way the product team has set it up at Microsoft is that you can also reuse some of this Liquid templating content. So you can create Liquid templates that can be reused across your site. And the whole idea of Liquids is that it's dynamic content. So it's about the information that's in your CRM system. You can have the logic based upon that so that you can make changes to the information that you're displaying on your portal based upon the data that's within there. So some of the basic Liquid syntax is that you can have tags, objects, and filters. So tags are the way that we can do programming logic. So this is a templating language, but it does have the capability to have also programming logic as part of that. So you can do things like have control flows. So if you wanted to say when or something should or shouldn't be executed, then you can input that logic here. So tags are always going to be wrapped by a mustache bracket and %sign. So you can see in the example we have here is we have an if condition and then an end if. So you could have, if it's true, then show this. If it's not, then show this other content or do this other logic. So you have the complete ability to do that within there. Some other tags that you might commonly use would be something like an iteration. So if you wanted to have like a for loop to run through a number of different objects, then you could have that within your Liquid code. You could also create variables and assign Liquid values to variables within there, as well as you can create templates to do different things and have reusable content as part of that. Excuse me. Another common syntax in Liquid is the objects. So an object is usually going to be an entity or various different predefined entities in the system. And those are usually wrapped by a double mustache bracket. So you can have an entity, or you could have an entity list as an object. You could have a page, or even your user could be an object. All of those objects will contain attributes on them. So if we look at the user is actually a CRM contact behind the scenes. So you can actually access all the attributes that are on the contact entity in the CRM. So you can just type user, and then using dot notation, you can access the attributes of the CRM contact entity. So if you want to display something like first name or last name or check a title and have logic based upon the attribute values, then you could easily make use of all of that information within there. Another common syntax is filters, and filters are used to basically modify the output. So there's a number of predefined filters available, and the Microsoft team is always adding new filters as part of this. So you have a number of string filters, like if you wanted to uppercase some text that you want in there, then you can easily do that, as well as you can have a number of different other string filters like concatenate and remove type things. So any of the string filters you would expect that you might see in your .NET programming languages, you can also see within the Liquid code. You can also have filters to set default values. So here the example we have, if item.attribute is null, then it will default that value to 5. So you can do lots of things with the basic syntax of Liquid, and it's important to understand the basic syntax because we're going to be utilizing this syntax in a lot of our advanced templates when we get into some of the logic that we're going to be building. So where can you use Liquid and where can you store Liquid is always a question that comes up. So you can use Liquid in content snippets, page templates, and again, anywhere that you really can put HTML within the portal, you can put Liquid. But there is also this other entity called web templates, and the web templates allow you to store a blog of Liquid that makes it reusable, so that you can have Liquid and then you can have it in various different places. So you might create something like a common page title or a way of formatting your breadcrumbs, and that might be a Liquid template that you want to have as a reusable component. The web template would make a perfect place for you to store that type of information. The include tag is a way that you can actually reuse that content of the template, and you can have that include tag anywhere that the actual Liquid can be executed. You can see from the example in the slide here, we have include web link list group, and then we have a series of parameters that you can pass to it. So this template is actually a template that takes the name of a web link set and then will render it using certain HTML. So it's taking the secondary navigation, going and getting that web link set, and it's iterating through it, and then it's going to present it in a certain fashion with certain HTML. And then they also have the parameter of whether they want to reveal descriptions. So this is just an example, but you can kind of get the idea that you can pass any number of parameters you want to it. They can be of text values, integer values, or even Booleans, so that you can make use of that information within your template. Now, another common pattern within Liquid is to do some template inheritance. So you want to not have to reuse or rewrite code in every template. You might want to have a standard template that provides a standard look and feel, and then have other templates inherit from that. So the extends and block tags allow you to create that template inheritance. So you can see from the example here, we have a template already called layout one column, and that has a bunch of HTML that's already associated to it. And then we also have within that template a block section called main. and we can override that block section in a particular other template with custom content. So if you're an ASP.NET developer, think of this as your master pages and your content areas. Your blocks are your content areas, and your extends are basically the master pages that you're extending from. It's the same type of concept that you would have within there. So now with all of that kind of basic syntax there, let's take a look at a demo of some of the basic syntax, just so we can get an idea of how it can actually be used. So I'm just going to switch the presentation to my desktop here, and we'll take a look at a portal that is one of the most recent builds of the Dynamics portal. This is just the custom portal that we have here, and I built a number of samples on this portal so that we can take a look at them. Excuse me. The first one that we're going to take a look at here is the economic development sites. And basically, this is just a page template here, which is servicing a web template which has an entity list on it. And this entity list is just surfacing a custom entity called economic development sites. So let's take a look at the CRM so we can understand how this page is actually built. So if we switch to the CRM, let's go to our portals and our web templates and find our economic development site page that we're using, which is actually the full page without child links. So this is the page template that is using the web template that will show all of that content. So we can see here that we have the extends tag, which means we're actually inheriting from the layout one column. So we're inheriting from the web template layout one column, and then we're overriding its block main section. So again, think of the extends as our master page in ASP.NET, and the block as your content area. Within here, we have the include tag, so we're including the page copy. And this is just another predefined liquid template that actually takes the web page copy and outputs it with some certain HTML tags and classes. It just makes it fast and accessible to do rather than rewriting all the HTML that does that. So on the page that we're displaying on the portal, we actually have an entity list associated to that page. So in here we have an if statement to check and see that there is actually an entity list on that page. If there is an entity list, then we want to include another predefined portal template, entity list, and to it we're going to pass a value. So we're going to pass a parameter to it, and that is going to be the ID of the entity list. So if the page didn't have an entity list, then it would skip over this block of code and it would not include this page template. So here you can see kind of a simple example of us extending an existing page template using the template tag to include other content, as well as using a predefined entity list template so that we can display a list of records on the page. So now if we go back to our portal, and let's click on the detail of one of these, our New Heights Community Center, and now we end up on a detail page for this. So let's see how exactly this page is also built. So let's go back into the portal, and this time let's go to web pages just so we can understand the full structure of how we get from a URL on the website all the way to a web template in the backend CRM. So let's find our economic development sites. So I'm just going to search, and let's go to the non-root page. And you'll see here's the actual web page with the URL. So there's the partial URL that we had in our browser. And then you can see here, it's using the page template, economic development site detail. If we go to this page template, you'll notice that this page template is of type web template, and it's referring to the web template, economic development site detail. If we click on that web template, then we get to the liquid code that's actually being rendered on that screen. This one also extends layout one column. Let's, for fun, switch this to layout two column wide right, which I know is another template, and just save that. And then within here, you can see that we're overriding the block section main. We're including that standard page copy. But then the first thing that we're doing is we're assigning a variable. So we're going and using one of the predefined objects within Liquid that exists within the portal, which is the request object. And then we're checking the parameters of that object and saying, is there an ID parameter? If there is, store it in this Liquid variable. So you can see here, this is a way that you can take information and store it in variables that we're going to then use later on for additional logic. So you might not have noticed, but if we go back to the portal here, we actually have a query string parameter that was passed to this page. So that's what that request.params is picking up, is this query string parameter here. And that is actually the GUID of an entity record within the CRM system. So we're taking that value and storing it in a variable, and then we're checking and seeing if that variable has a value. So if econ ID exists, basically is what this statement is saying, then go and try and get that entity record from the CRM. So there's another object predefined as part of the portal called entities, which allows you to query a single record in the CRM by GUID. So we're saying entities, and then the schema name of the entity we want to access, and then we're passing it the ID of the record. So this is the ID that was in the query string, and then assigning that entity record to this particular variable. After that, we're doing another check to say, hey, did we get back an actual entity record? Because if we did, we want to actually present the information for that entity record. If we didn't, we're probably going to want to show the user an error message that says, hey, we didn't find anything for that ID, or you didn't provide a proper ID. So if we do have an entity record come back, then we're just going to present some data in a nicely formatted way. And you can see here we just have a bunch of HTML that formats our entity record data in various ways. So you can see here we're actually using the object, and we're using the economic development site entity record, and then we're accessing the attributes of that particular entity record. So we're accessing the address line 1, the address line 2, and we could do checks in here to see if there's certain values, but we could also add some filters. So let's add a filter to upcase all of the address line 1. And then let's also add a filter on postal code to say, we'll give it a default and say no postal. So we can make quick changes like this, and it will take place on the portal for us right away. But before we do that, let's also just have the other condition taken care of. So if there wasn't an economic development site ID passed to it, then we would not have an economic development site. And let's give the user a friendly error message. So we just have a nice bootstrap alert warning that says economic development site not found. So you're just handling both conditions of when something's there and when something's not. So you're always providing a robust application that provides the user with the appropriate messaging as to what's taking place. So let's go back to our portal and let's look for our changes. So let's make sure our street 1 gets uppercased, and there's no postal code on this one, so we should see no postal. And also, we made the change of our column, so we've actually ended up with a column on the right-hand or the left-hand side as well. So you can see our street 1 got uppercased, and because there was no value on postal code, that default filter value was taken place. So hopefully this will show you that the basic syntaxes are very applicable and can be easily used and modified within the portal as well. So let's just switch back to our presentation here. And now we want to take a look at some of the advanced techniques that we can do in the portal. So what else can we do with Liquid? We've kind of taken a look at the basics, but what else does Liquid have that's maybe not as well documented in the documentation currently? So one of the things that is very popular that you can see within the partner portal is the chart liquid tag. And unfortunately, this one's not yet made it to the documentation, but you can find lots of examples of it within the partner portal, as well as there's a number of blogs that have talked about this component. So the chart component takes a CRM chart ID as well as a CRM view ID as parameters. And these parameters are required, otherwise it will not surface anything. And it will then allow you to surface the charts that you build in the CRM system on your portal. So for this one here we have on our screen, we're showing an estimated revenue by close date, and it's looking at the opportunities closing in the next month. So that's just a CRM chart as well as a CRM view that's being surfaced. So this can kind of make all of the functionality you've built for your back office easily accessible to the portal as well, so you can utilize all of that information within there. So it's a very handy component or tag to be able to use within the portal as well. Another one that's not as well documented yet, but there are a bunch of examples within the portal code base as well, is the knowledge liquid object. So in previous iterations of the portal used the old CRM 2011 knowledge base, but the new version of the portal uses the new knowledge management found in the Interactive Service Hub. So the Microsoft team has made a knowledge article entity or knowledge article object in Liquid that will allow you to be able to access those articles. So that knowledge object comes with an array of articles and also an array of categories. And you can see these in use in any of the portals that include knowledge management and kind of get the examples from there. So some of the popular ones that they have within there is the ability to kind of get the top articles or the most popular articles or the most recent articles. So they've also created some filters for top, popular, and recent that allow you to sort the articles array. And you can actually change the sort parameters on these if you wanted to as well. So by default, the examples here are sorting by the count and the language code, just so it's supporting additional languages. But you could make these whatever you would like. And you could potentially apply these filters to other aspects of things within the portal. So it's always good to check the functionality within the base portals themselves, because they will often reveal a lot of information that is not necessarily documented in the administrator's guide to the portal. So one of the other things that's not as well documented just yet is the Fetch XML Liquid Tag. This tag is similar to your entity list and entity view liquid objects, but it just gives you the flexibility to get right down to the liquid code yourself, or right down to the fetch code yourself, and be able to customize it how you like. And basically it can suit your needs as to whichever way you want it. So this makes it for very fast development, and you can basically do whatever you want within this fetch code. So one thing is that you can execute your custom queries, and as part of this, it's just like you're executing it against the SDK. You're going to get back a result object that contains an entity collection of all the entity records that fetch query returned. Now, one thing to note that might be different from those that are familiar with the ADX Studio Fetch XML tag is that the Dynamics 365 portals does require entity permissions. So you do need to set the entity permissions for your fetch queries to be operating correctly. And basically, once you have your fetch query returning results, then you can use the for loop within Liquid to iterate through the results, and basically you will be utilizing an entity object as part of that. And I just seen a question pop up is, can I retrieve more than 5,000 records via fetch in Liquid? You are still beholden to the limits of Fetch XML, but there is no reason you couldn't implement a paging technique as part of your Liquid query. So you could do that in terms of you fetch a batch, get your first 5,000, and then execute another batch, which gets the second 5,000, and so on and so forth. So, and we'll look at some further examples of this to show you kind of this in action as well. And I'll just leave that other question so that you can see some examples of this going forward. So another thing that you can do now that you have the ability to use the Fetch XML directly in your Liquid code is you can build really complex fetch queries. So you might have the requirement that you actually need to build a fetch query that involves many different linked entities. So you now need the ability to access all the attributes of those linked entities. So you can actually do that pretty easily just by setting the alias of the linked entity itself. So here we have an example. We're making a fetch query to the course schedule object or course schedule entity, and then we also have a linked entity that's going to the course itself, so pulling the details of the course, and we've given that the alias of course link. So to access an attribute on the course schedule entity, you would just do that through your normal dot notation, But to access an attribute through a linked entity, you actually need to use a selector, not the dot notation, to access that information. So you can see here in the example we have entity, and then we open the selectors with our square brackets. We type in the alias, and if we wanted to, say, access the DPX level attribute, it would be course link is the alias, and then the attribute reference would be the actual DPX level attribute. Now this still works with entity types like entity reference as well as option set, so you would still have the ability to access the ID, the name, or other attributes like value and label for an option set. So you can still use the dot notation outside of the selector as part of this as well. So one of the other popular things that isn't really documented and isn't really well discussed at this point yet is the web type's meme type or content type. So we know web templates from our basic demo is that we can look at and have liquid code stored in a web template. But one of the things that you can actually do with a web template is change the content type. The default content type, if you don't set one, is actually text HTML, and the examples that we looked at thus far were all HTML-based examples. So we can include lots of HTML, CSS, or JavaScript in those type of templates. But if you wanted to, say, return a different data type, like JSON or XML or any of the other meme types out there that are supported, then you have the ability to do that by overriding that value. So now, one important thing to note is if you are looking to override the meme type, you do need to clear on the page template entity the use website header and footer value. So what does this use website header and footer value actually mean is that it is the scaffolding to the portal. So it provides all of the wrapping HTML around a particular template, things like your header, all the style sheets that get loaded at the top, all of the JavaScript that gets loaded as part of the portal, perhaps the page title and the breadcrumbs are part of this. So if you want to return just a JSON object or a JSON array, then you need to clear this box so that the web template is all that's returned. Clearing this box will ensure that the only thing returned when you access this page template is the contents of the page template and nothing else. So now that we can create custom returns, how can we actually utilize this information? So combining that fetch XML tag and the web template's meme type will allow you to create and take CRM data and surface it in a secure manner or an anonymous manner, because remember the fetch XML tag is beholden to the actual entity permissions. You can have all of this based upon particular roles or relationships in the CRM as well to secure the data. And this allows you to return the CRM data basically in any format. So you can have it JSON, XML, even an iCal, or an RSS feed. So there are a ton of different content types out there, and we will post these slides to the XRM virtual site, and you can go to this Mozilla developer link, which contains a complete list of all the meme types. And that will allow you to kind of get some ideas as to the types of templates you can build as part of that. So with this logic, you can actually create your own service-based endpoints in your portal. So you're basically creating this custom response return type template. And now there is an option within entity list to return a node data feed, but that's specifically a node data feed, and that actually doesn't utilize entity permissions. So this is a way that you can actually build your own services and customize the output in any way you want. So you can make it available for many different things. So now that we can return it in various different formats, how do we consume that information? So that content consumption is going to vary based upon the type of information you output. If you output, say, a JSON, you might want to consume that like it's a web service. So you might utilize jQuery and an AJAX type of functionality to consume that. And that's where the paging can come in. You would make a request, get your set of records back, and then you would check and see, hey, are there more records? Then we can go get those. If you're returning, say, an iCal well, that's probably going to be handled by your browser because it's detecting that you're getting an iCal type format back, and it's going to consider that an ICS type of format. So it'll try to open that with whatever calendar program you have. The XRM virtual site actually uses a liquid template to allow you to add the calendar or the event to your particular calendar. So when you click that Add Calendar button, you're actually hitting a liquid template behind the scenes. So once you have all this information, and once you have all these service endpoints, you can consume these with JavaScript libraries. And there's probably hundreds of thousands of JavaScript libraries out there that allow you to consume this in a whole bunch of different ways. Some of the popular ones that most of the portals might use might be charts or maps or calendars. So we're going to look at a couple of examples now of how you can actually consume this with various different libraries, or how you can build services and then consume them with various different libraries. But again, this is really just a sampling of scenarios that we have here. The number of JavaScript libraries are just endless. You could go on for days and days and days looking for different libraries and finding new ones to consume different content types and present data in various different ways. So let's switch back to our portal here and take a look at some of the demos that we have set up here. Just present. All right, so the first one we're going to take a look at is just a simple JSON example of returning some course data. So first, actually, let's switch to our CRM here. And in our CRM, just so we understand what we're getting back, is we have a simple little demo, simple training module, which contains some entities for courses, as well as course schedules, instructors, locations, and everything like that. So within schedules, we actually have a number of different schedules set up here with some instructors as part of them. And going back to our portal here, if we click on the course JSON, we're actually going to get back an array of courses. So this is actually making a fetch XML query to our course schedule entity, as well as it's joining with the instructor entity, and it's outputting a bunch of different schedules that we have configured in the system. So it's combining the course name with our actual instructor, and then it's taking the date that the course schedule is set for and outputting that as an ISO format, and then same for the end date. It's providing that, as well as we've added a length attribute. So let's look at the actual web template that actually makes this up, and we'll start from the web page so you can see the whole URL structure that we have in place. So remember, at the top here we have our URL of /course.json. So let's go find that in the actual CRM under the portal's web pages. So let's just search for course, and there's our course JSON. And here we have the page template it's using is course JSON. And let's click on that and see what it's using. It's using the web type course JSON. And remember that all important use website header and footer is cleared in this case. And this means, again, that all that is going to be surfaced is your course JSON content that is in this web template. So all we should get back is the information that's in this web template. Within this web template, the first thing that we have in here is the fetch XML tag. And then we're going to have our fetch query. And you can see here we have quite a complex query that contains a number of different attributes, as well as we have a filter as part of this. So you can do whatever you would normally do within a fetch XML tag and include it in here. So you can build out your fetch XML using the advanced time utility or using the XRM toolbox fetch XML builder, and then you can bring it in here and you can enhance it with liquid code. So we can dynamically build our fetch XML query by including parameters. So we have one here for location as well as start and end date. So if it detects that there's a query string parameter location, then we can include the condition to say, hey, we only want course locations that are for the location ID. And we also use a filter on here called XML escape just to ensure all the values coming back in the parameter are safe values to be queried against the CRM system as well. So that's another filter that you can use within your code. The same thing for the start and end date. If they're included as parameters on the request, then we can make use of them in the conditions. Further on, you can see that we can actually access the instructor information as well. So we have a linked entity attribute for the instructor entity, and we have also set the alias to instructor link so that we can easily access it. So it is important to set your aliases and not have them as perhaps the default GUID values that they might come out from the advanced find itself, just so that you can easily type them in your Liquid code. So we also have another linked entity off to course, which allows us to pull some additional course information as well. And we also have another condition on a linked entity. So just as we were above in our condition, we can also have a further condition as part of that. So now we have our fetch XML. So what do we do with the result in fetch XML itself? So we have the fetch XML, and we would basically, the first line that we have in here that's going to be read in the template is the opening of an array in JSON. So we're opening an array in JSON, and then the next thing we're doing is we're iterating through the results. So feed is actually the name of our fetch XML query. So we defined our fetch XML as feed. And then within fetch XML, there's a results attribute. And then within results, there's an array of entities. So for each entity that is in the entities collection, we're going to iterate through, and we're going to output a little JSON object. So that JSON object is going to include a title, and for that title, we're combining various different properties here. So we're including the course name, and this is actually using the attribute course ID, which is an entity reference. So we're accessing the through the dot notation, the name attribute of that entity reference. And then our next attribute that we're actually accessing is actually through that linked entity, so through that instructor alias. So we have the selector open, we access the alias, and then we can access any of the attributes as part of that alias. So one of those is the contact ID attribute, which is also an entity reference. And you can see here we close the selector, and then we access the entity reference's name attribute. For the start and end date, we're just accessing attributes on the actual course schedule entity itself. And then you can see here, so that it just doesn't output the date as it is in CRM, we're actually applying a filter, a date filter to do this, so that it outputs it in the standard ISO format as well. So you can do different filters, and there's a variety of date filters. If you wanted to add a day to it, or you wanted to add a year to it, you could do all of those type of things through the date filter. So I'd invite you to take a look at the documentation so you can get an idea of all of the filters that are available to you within Liquid. We also have the length attribute here. So, and we also have the default filter. So if there is no length applied, then we can easily have a default of 0 instead of it being completely blank. Let's add another one in here. So let's add length unit, and hopefully you can see how quickly we can change this type of query. So we're going to access this through item, and then let's just make our life easy and copy some of this, and we'll access length unit. So length unit is actually if I wanted to get the value of that option set item, then I could type value. Or if I wanted to get the text, then I would type label. So I want to get the text because this is going to be for display purposes. And then here at the bottom, we have an unless statement. So this is your not equal to if, basically. And basically, we want to say if this is the last item in the for loop, then don't include a comma because there's no more elements after this in the array. But if this is not the last item in the loop, then do include a comma because there's going to be another element after this or another object in the array after this. Then we basically end the for statement, and then we close the JSON array with the square bracket. So let's save this template.
Hey, Colin, you had 2 questions here. One was under what user is that fetch XML executed? Mm-hmm. And then also another question on calling custom actions or API methods with Liquid.
Okay, sure. So the Liquid is executed under the current user of the portal. So it will, if I'm signed in as John Smith, then it uses John Smith contacts record to actually access the information in the CRM. If I'm not signed in as anybody, then it uses the anonymous context. And the Dynamics portal actually uses a server-to-server based authentication, so it's not actually executing as a named user in the CRM system. It executes under system, but Fetch XML will execute based upon the entity permissions that you have within there. The API methods, can we use Liquid to call custom actions or use API methods? For example, to be able to search time slots available in a calendar. So yes, and we're actually going to get to that exact example in a second here. So if you just hold on a moment, we will show you that exact example of being able to pass parameters from a calendar to a Fetch XML query, and hopefully that will answer your question. So now that we have this saved, let's flip back to our portal. And I've refreshed it, and you can see here it's added the length day or the length unit, and I made a little bit of a goof, is that I should have actually put this in brackets because it is text and not an actual integer. So let's just save that again, and if we go back and we wait for the cache to clear, there's our brackets, and now we have days. So now we've created a REST endpoint service, and we have basically an array of course schedules. So that's pretty cool, but what can we do with that? So the thing that we often would do with some sort of date information is that we would surface it on a calendar. So this is a full calendar, which is a JavaScript library, which will allow you to basically take JSON data and display it on a calendar. So it's reading that course's feed, and it's now displaying it onto the calendar. Now, I'm also, just to answer your question about the API and the parameters that you can pass to it, I'm going to navigate between the months here, and you'll notice that there's going to be a query that pops up or a request that pops up as part of that. So you can see I navigated to May. We got a bunch of different sets of data, and you can see the request that went out as part of that. And it actually passed a start and end date. So we're actually filtering, and remember we had those conditions in our Fetch XML to take those particular parameters and show them on the port, or to use them in the Fetch XML query that it was performing. So you can include any number of parameters, and actually we have another one up here to filter by location. So if I only wanted to see the courses in the month of May that were at location A, then I could select that location, click refresh events, and now it's only showing me the courses that are related to that location. And you'll notice in the request here, we have the new location parameter showing up as well. So you can add any number of parameters in there, and basically that should allow you to be able to search for your available time slots. You could have a form that queries an endpoint, and you built that endpoint based upon a Fetch XML, which took all of those parameters and made them part of the query that it did. And basically, as you navigate from month to month, so actually let's clear by location because there were no location A's in April, then it will make that query to the back end. And you as the user are none the wiser that it's making queries to the back end constantly. You're just happy that it's getting the data that you want. And because you're doing this all custom yourself, you can basically determine the rules and everything for this. So you can fully customize the full calendar JS to your liking. So if you wanted to display different colors or you wanted different information presented in here, then you could do that. So you have the full capability that you might have or you might not have with the entity list calendar component. So this is just a way to go beyond the existing components out of the box that are available and customize it really to meet your particular requirements. So just the question that popped up from James here. So what about searching service calendar? It utilizes multiple resource scheduling rules, requires an API call, not just fetch. So as long as you could make that API call in JavaScript through Ajax, then yes, you could. If that API call requires a secure server call, then you will not be able to do that necessarily within Liquid. So you'll have to evaluate what type of service call you're making and whether it's something you can make publicly through the Liquid code like that, whether you're comfortable basically making it through JavaScript. So let's go back to our homepage and take another look at another example. So the same example that we were looking at for course JSON, let's look at course XML. And basically this is the same query, and basically it's outputting the results in XML instead of JSON. And if we go look at the template in the CRM, it's basically the same logic. It's just that the output that we have at the end is using XML. So you're free to format your results in whatever type of method you want. So if you wanted them in your own made-up content type, then you could do that. You'll notice also that the MIME type set here is the application/XML so that the browser knows. If we go back and we look at the actual request that came in here, and we look at the headers, you'll notice that the content type matches that meme type that we set. So the content type respects what you set in the CRM from a meme type perspective as well. So let's also take a look at another example of another library that we have within here, which is the charting library. So we've created another service, and this one is using Fetch's Aggregate capabilities. So you might not be aware, but Fetch has the ability to aggregate queries through group by or summing on the server itself, so you don't have to take in the results and actually do them yourself, like do the aggregation yourself. You can have the server do that type of work. So there's an aggregate property on Fetch XML that you can set. And here, basically what we're doing is we're counting all the course schedules and grouping them by instructor. So now we're going to be able to get a count of all the actual information in the course schedule and know how many schedules per instructor there are going to be. We use the same logic of outputting that in the JSON. So we're just iterating through the results and outputting the alias values. So schedule count is the value of our actual count, and we're just outputting that as a count in the JSON object, and then we're providing the instructor information as well. So to consume that, we actually have a template called Courses Aggregate Chart, and this is actually using the chart.js library. So you can see here we've basically taken that aggregate information and displayed it in a nice easy format. So we've got all the colors that we had from our calendar and displayed that in the calendar and have a nice pretty legend at the bottom. We also have the same information in the bar chart, although our bar chart is looking a little weird because we've set the scale to 50 because we're expecting a lot of courses. But we can easily correct these type of things because this page is actually just a Liquid template. So if we go back into the CRM here, and let's look at the Liquid template that page is using, which is the course aggregate chart. The first thing you're going to notice is that this extends the template just like our other one. So we're inheriting from another template, and then we're overriding basically the main content section of that template. And then basically we're having two canvas components, the one on the left being that donut one, and the one on the right being that bar. We're bringing in the chart.js library. And then we have some Fetch XML to bring in the color codes for our instructors. And then we have a little JavaScript method to help us find the color for a particular instructor. And then in the document ready, basically what we have is we have an AJAX get call to that courses aggregate JSON page. So we'll go get me that JSON. And then in the done method of that AJAX, we have the ability to basically iterate through the results and format that data so that it's good for the chart.js library. So we iterate through the results and format it into labels, count data, and colors. And then we take that data and we put it into the chart.js components. So here is just the donut one that we were looking at. And you'll see here we've taken the labels and set it to the labels parameter for chart.js, as well as the count data and the colors. We've also set some animation options and said, hey, we want the legend to display at the bottom. Let's change a couple of things. So let's make the legend display at the top. Let's change the type of chart from and then also down below that, we actually have the other chart, which is the bar chart. And let's correct our scaling here. So it's not 50. It's actually, the max is going to be 5. Let's go over that. So we save this, and then we will refresh our portal page. And there you can see our legend switched to the top, and our donut has switched to a pie chart, and now our bar chart is looking a little bit better. So you could actually combine all these things as well. So you could combine a calendar and a chart together if you wanted, and as you navigated months, your chart is also going to refresh. So the options here are really within the capabilities you have within JavaScript. So anything that you can do within the JavaScript frameworks or the JavaScript libraries, you can easily make use of in your Liquid templates. So this will give you ways to be able to create rich types of experiences. So I'm going to show you another one. And this one is more of a mapping demo. So here we have a Bing Maps map that is centered around Phoenix. And we have some bootstrap controls over here on the right, which is just HTML and everything like that. And basically they query the CRM for some settings and the different types of service requests that they might have. So let's change the date range to 12 months, and we'll click the Map It button. And behind the scenes, it's making a fetch XML query, and it's making a query to a service, and it actually has the paging as part of that. So it might not have come across on the screen sharing, but when I click the Map It button, it's slowly loading information. So you might see it load in 5 and then another 5. It basically iterates through the number of pages that it has in the data. So if we bring up the browser tools and we'll just click the Map It again, you'll see here we start with the first page, and in the response you can see all the service request data itself. So we have this formatted in XML, but one of the things you might notice is that more records is true. So in our JavaScript we're basically looking for this more records, and if it is true we're basically making another call to page 2. So there's page 2. We get all the way down to page 9 and more records is false, so our JavaScript stops. So just going back on that paging question that you had, this would be a way in which you can implement paging and go beyond that 5,000. Now 5,000 is getting a little crazy in terms of the amount of data you might be returning to a browser, so just be aware of the performance implications of returning that amount of data. But the concept is there that you could do it if you desire to do that type of thing. So also filters can be taken into account as part of this. So let's just clear our network, and if we click graffiti, we actually only get 3 pages of data back because there's only that many service requests. So the paging setup for this was only 5 records, but you could set your paging values to any type of records you wanted as well. So we're just getting to the end here, so I'm just going to switch back to our presentation. And so there's questions, so data input, like entering user data. So one of the limitations of Liquid is that it does not take user data right now. It is very much a presentation language, so it's for presenting data and presenting information in ways. You can query data in the CRM system, but at present you can't actually insert data through the Liquid templates. And there's another question, can you embed a Liquid page within CRM? Which user would get this executed? You could by iframing in a portal, but Liquid is actually a portal technology within the CRM, within the portal. It's not an actual CRM programming language, so you can't actually do that within there. So Denny, I will get to your questions. I'm just going to quickly review. So demo summary, we looked at services, return type of JSON XML, the iCalendar I didn't have a chance to show you, but definitely check out the XRM virtual site, click the Add to Calendar button, and that's actually using a Liquid template. We looked at the full calendar, the chart.js, and the Bing Maps, all using jQuery and various services behind the scenes. If you're interested in learning more, I've been blogging for the last month about almost all the scenarios that I showed you here today. So all the code and everything that I've gone through is available as blogs online. So just hit up the tag / Liquid templates, and you can actually get the code and step-by-step instructions to do that. All the objects, the tags, the filters that we've talked about, and so much more is available in the Dynamics 365 Portal Administrator's Guide. And again, the documentation isn't always up to date, so utilize the elements in your portals. Install all the portals in the trial CRM and go through the Liquid templates. Look at the examples that the product team is putting within there, because the product team moves quite quickly and puts new things in all the time. Even within the monthly updates, you can find new changes within there. So definitely check those out. And again, thank you everybody for attending. I am Colin Verma with Adoxio, and if you want to get a hold of me, then you can reach me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or through my blog. There's an email address as well. And I will just leave this slide up and answer a couple of questions for anybody that wants to stick around a little long, and I think Daryl might have some slides he might want to show as well at the end here. So Daryl, go ahead whenever you're ready.
I have nothing new to add besides thank you very much, Colin. I appreciate it. And there are a few questions. You guys want to stick around, Colin's happy to answer those questions. But I am going to end the recording and call it a day. Feel free to check out the Twitter feed whenever that gets posted and retweet and like. Thank you.